Back in 1987, the body of a young woman was found. She'd been murdered. Crime Watch did a reconstruction. 5 months later, another girl's body was discovered. Both lived in the same town, in Tunbridge Wells, both killed in the same way. Police thought a serial killer was on the loose, and they launched a massive manhunt. But 20 years on, no one has ever been caught. Detectives have never given up, nor have the victims' families. So watch this fresh appeal and see if it triggers any memories, because they might just be what the police need.
Recaps with Caps. Today we bring you the story of the Bedsit Killer. For over 20 years, the search has been on for the Bedsit Killer. And now that search has come to an end. You see, the monster behind the Tunbridge Wells Bedsit murders, in which 2 young women were savagely raped and killed 34 years ago, has now been found and will spend the rest of his life in jail. The vile crimes committed by David Fuller, 66, and a decade spent concealing his evil deeds by living with his wife and son, 20, quietly living in Heathfield, have finally caught up with him. It seemed like Kent police would never get their man, but over the years they had vowed to the families of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce and the people of Tunbridge that they would never give up hunting for the Bedsit Killer. You see, these 2 young women lived in Bedsits, in a town where they never knew each other. But one thing they had in common, both was loved by their friends and family and had their whole lives ahead of them until they met the Bedsit Killer. It was a day the families of the 2 women, along with the residents of Tunbridge Wells, thought they would never see. Wendy's naked body, discovered in her bedsit on Tuesday the 23rd, 1987, and then 5 months later, on November the 24th, 1987, Caroline was killed outside her bedsit. This is how he became known as the Bedsit Killer. Caroline, mainly naked apart from a pair of tights, was found 40 miles away by a tractor driver submerged in a dike on December the 15th. In court, Fuller, who was looking very pale and balding, was one time an athletic, clean cyclist. But you can never judge a book by its cover. He not only raped his victims, he hit them on the head with a weapon, strangled and terrified them, and would later go on to have sex with his victims' dead bodies. He really must have thought he had got away with his evil crimes, which had become 2 of the UK's most infamous unsolved cases. But while Wendy and Caroline are no longer here to help convict the killer, the evidence continues to tell the story more than 3 decades after their death. As said earlier, Fuller lived with his family in Heathfield. His neighbours are very shocked, having no clue of the monster who lived right next door to them. Many will ask how he got away with it. Fuller had come into contact with police and the courts between 1973 and 1977 with multiple creeper-type burglaries. It seems he had many red flags that were not getting noticed. He always showed a particular skill in breaking and entering into people's homes. Yes, it is possible he may have broken into Wendy's bedsit, as there was no sign of forced entry, and lay in wait for her like a creep. At the time of the murders, the use of DNA in crimes was at its very early stages. The profile they had of Wendy's killer from the scene was crude, and a national DNA database did not exist at that time. As technology advanced, Kent police continued to revisit the samples, and the labs extracted a full DNA profile from the duvet in 1999, which unfortunately it failed to match any on the national database which had been created back in 1995. In 2019, for the first time, detectives were finally able to forensically link Caroline to her killer through partial DNA extracted from Caroline's tights, despite the years which had passed and the tights being submerged for 3 weeks in a ditch. Now technology is so advanced, we don't face the same issues we did in 1987. The profiles and partial profiles which had DNA code in the same order were fed into a database to search for potential relatives of the killer. Detectives visited more than 90 people who were most likely to be related to the killer in a process of elimination. By the end of November last year, the lab revealed it had a very close match, possibly a sibling of the killer. The family member had been convicted of a crime and was questioned about their relatives. This is where the net grew tighter around Fuller, and it was on December the 1st the police arrived to arrest him, with Fuller telling them he had no knowledge of the case. What he didn't know was that his DNA was an exact match to the profile from semen at the scene of Wendy's murder and from Caroline's tights. It was 160,000 times more likely not to have originated from him. A bloody fingerprint from Wendy's scene was also his. He was charged with both their murders the next day. Fuller always lied to police, claiming he didn't know Buster Brown's restaurant in Camden Road, where Caroline had worked. In fact, diary entries showed he had visited there. He also lied that he didn't know either road where the women lived, when in fact he had lived in one of them in the early 1980s and had visited a friend in Grosvenor Park. Despite saying he did not know the area well, he had also lived in Upper Grosvenor Road and Lime Hill Road, among others. A semi-professional photographer, he also used the photograph developing company Supersnap, as the distinctive envelopes found at his home showed Wendy had worked at Supersnaps in Camden Road. Today we bring a story to you of the Bedsit Killer. Twisted, double murderer David Fuller could have attacked 100 more victims, storing grotesque videos of himself violating women's bodies at his home. Chilling footage shows the moment that the necrophiliac was arrested in his dingy lair and calmly went with cops who discovered his grim perversion after searching his home in Heathfield, Sussex. Body cam footage from his arrest shows the moment that the monster calmly went with officers and was charged with the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce. Horrifying images of Fuller having sex with 98 dead girls and women in mortuaries were found concealed in the office he had converted from a box bedroom. Police believe the depraved footage points to the motive behind the 1987 Bedsit murders of Wendy, 25, and Caroline, 20, in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. Pathologist Dr. Nat Kerry re-examined evidence from the original homicide investigations and concluded that Wendy was sexually assaulted on the point of her death or after death. Detectives have concluded Fuller had a fixation with necrophilia, a rare perversion of having sex with corpses. The shocking mortuary film shown Fuller carrying out the twisted acts from 2008 up until November last year, the month before his arrest. However, it is feared he could have been carrying out the violation of bodies from when he first started working for the former Kent and Sussex Hospital in Tunbridge Wells in 1989. More than 3,500 exhibits, computers, phones, and hardware diaries were found. They included 100 hard drives, 2,220 floppy disks, 30 SIM cards, 1,300 CDs and DVDs, 34,000 photo prints, negatives, slides, and camera rolls. Police brought specialist computers to forensically interrogate more than 23 terabytes of data from the digital devices. Fuller was employed at the hospital as an electrical maintenance supervisor. Shortly before that hospital closed down in September 2011, Fuller went to work at the Tunbridge Wells Hospital in Pembury in the same job for an outside contractor. Although he had no specific role in the mortuary, Fuller had access for a swipe card to all areas of the hospital. He carried out the perverted sex acts on female bodies at night after mortuary staff had left work for the day. On some occasions, father of four Fuller filmed himself returning to the same body to fulfill his depraved desires. He is shown going to one's woman corpses on 4 occasions. Detective Superintendent Ivan Beasley said the scale of offending is unprecedented in the UK. There is nothing we have ever seen like this. The shocking mortuary material emerged during a search of Fuller's 3-bedroom house where he lived with his third wife, a nurse at the hospital where he worked, and their son, 20. Fuller had converted an upstairs box room into an office which was monitored by CCTV, a private domain, concealing his work secrets under layers of protection. Inside a wardrobe in the office, cops found a cabinet, and screwed to the back of that was a handmade box in which 4 hard drives were hidden, containing images of corpses being defiled. The home office also had a hatch to a loft where Fuller had hoarded thousands of items which took 9 officers over 5 months to comb through. A team of more than 100 officers and staff were assembled to sift through 40 million images and 4 million video clips. A total of 3 million stills and moving images contain offences of child pornography, extreme sensual images, as well as the disturbed mortuary offences. Detectives also seized 150,000 hours of CCTV from Tunbridge Wells Hospital, stretching back to the summer of 2020, and have analysed Fuller's swipe card records going back to 2019. Although cameras do not cover the area where bodies were kept refrigerated, CCTV showed Fuller entering the mortuary and its main area at relevant times. Of the 98 bodies Fuller filmed himself with, 78 have been identified and their families are shortly due to be informed. More than 150 specialist family liaison officers specially trained in dealing with grieving relatives have been recruited from forces across the country to deliver the shocking news to them. Police say some of those he violated will never be identified because of the way he filmed the corpses. A detective working on the case has said it's been a challenging process for him and his staff having to view the content. Officers consulted police colleagues from other forces who dealt with the 2017 Grenfell Tower fire and the Manchester Arena bombing for advice on body identification. Police set up regular panel meetings with the NHS and Coroner's Office on how to identify the defouled corpses, with around 25 female bodies being in the mortuary at any one time. A grant of $1.5 million has been provided by the Victim Support Service to cover costs of the unique process of informing loved ones of those Fuller defouled in death. He has been charged with a total of 51 offences from the material that was found at his home, 44 of which relate to the 78 identified corpses and include overarching charges with multiple victims. Having penetrative sex with a corpse is covered by Section 70 of the Sexual Offences Act and punishable with a maximum of 2 years imprisonment. However, it is understood that the following Fuller case, the government plans to review the sentencing guideline to increase the penalty. Fuller has admitted to police he is in the films taken of the bodies. Senior CPS prosecutor Libby Clark, who dealt with the Babes in the Woods murders, said this is the most disturbed and challenging case I've ever been involved with. Horrific, offending on a scale that we have never seen before. When I stopped to think about it, I found it almost unbelievable that we have a case on this nature and scale. I found it particularly chilling, some of the evidence of sex after death. Fuller must have remained with Wendy for some time after her death before making his way from her flat.